Hi everybody. Today I want to give you some tips that will help you bring your interviewing for a law firm position to the next level. In other words, next level law firm interview strategies. So let me just tell you what we're going to talk about generally. We're going to give you 4 or 5 key tips to help you in your effort to land the law firm job of your dreams, or at least the next one on your career climb. Basically, I'm going to give you some inside tips as a practicing attorney that will help you stand out and impress. I want to help you impress the interviewers so that you can get the job that you deserve. We're going to start with the simple point that, sure, interviews can be nerve-wracking. We don't expect everyone to go into an interview thinking that this is going to be fun or that they're going to do just an amazing job in every facet of what they're discussing with the interviewer. To be frank, even the interviewer isn't expecting this to be a perfect experience. They might not ask all the right questions, you might not give all the right answers, but that alone isn't likely to mean that you will or won't be offered the position. So what can we do? Well, we can help you prepare, not just the normal types of preparation as far as digging in and getting to know both your own credentials and what the firm might be looking for, but also preparing to better answer the questions that are asked, even once you know the general factual basis for the answers. So basically, what makes a great interview? Well, the key thing to keep in mind is that a good interview is more like a conversation than an exam. Don't think of every question you're being asked as a test question that has a right or wrong answer. You want the interview to be a good back and forth, a nice dialogue between you and the interviewer so you can establish some rapport, and that way the interviewer is more likely to rate you positively in whatever the review process they have internally in selecting candidates. It's not all about you during the interview. The person that is interviewing you also has interests and motivations and considerations. They may have other things that they would like to be doing with that time. They're taking time out of their busy day because their firm has asked them to, or it's part of their responsibilities and their job. But the easier you can make that experience on them, the better it's likely to be for you as well. Okay, so here's our first key strategy. Know your objective going in. Now, in many cases, your objective could very well be that you need a job and this law firm is hiring new lawyers or lawyers at your experience level, or at least you hope they are. But certainly it's not enough to go into an interview with the sole rationale that they have a position available and you need a job that will pay you a decent income. There has to be some other reason why you want that position, either because it's a good career fit for you long term, it provides a good training opportunity, or at the very least, you have some background, experience, interest, etc. that makes you suited for that position, or if nothing else, is a reason why you're attracted to that position versus another one. So break this down 2 ways. In knowing your objective, first consider why you. What qualifies you for this position? Why would they hire you over someone else? This may be because you have previous work experience in the same practice area or with similar firms, or it may be that you have educational experience that will at least give you a basic fundamental background for the area of law that you would be practicing with the firm, or perhaps you even have other non-legal industry experience that will somehow qualify you for the position you're seeking. Second, ask why them. In other words, it's not just about you. Of all the firms, what interests you in this one? Why are you going after this opportunity when you could work at another firm? Again, realistically, it may be that this is the only firm within certain parameters that happens to be hiring or that has offered you an interview. But again, that's not going to provide you a persuasive story when you're speaking to the interviewer. You need to know something about that firm and why it appeals to you beyond the fact, again, that they have a job and they can pay you. One thing that's important to keep in mind as you're planning is that you can't oversell yourself in the interview. You really don't want to, because in the end of the day, you want a job that's right for you. You're not trying to squeeze yourself into a position that isn't likely to work out. In the long run, that's only likely to cause more trouble than it's worth. On one hand, you probably wouldn't have the interview if you couldn't do the job. There's something in your qualifications and resumes or other application materials that you've already submitted that suggests to the firm or the attorneys involved in interviewing and the hiring process that you may well be able to perform this job. Likely, they're just trying to pick amongst several qualified candidates to decide which of these people they would like to work with going forward. So, in the same vein, don't try to tell the interviewer what you think they want to hear. Also, always a bad strategy. First of all, you don't know what they want to hear. You may think you have an idea of what the so called right answer would be to any particular question, but there could be any reason that the interviewer is looking for a different answer than the one you think they want you to provide. Second, if you just give your honest answer and your best answer to the question that you're being asked, then you're going to stand out either as providing the right answer or perhaps even providing an answer that the interviewer never anticipated, that upon reflection, for whatever reason, suggests that you are a distinguishable candidate, and preferably a distinguishable candidate in a positive light. But even if, as long as you give an honest answer and one that you think makes sense, consistent with the other strategies that we're going to discuss, they decide at the end of the day it's a negative for you based on that answer, then at least you won't end up in a position that wouldn't have been right for you. All right, our next strategy, know your audience. Who are you speaking with? This could either mean the firm overall, or where possible, the individuals who will be interviewing you. Even if you don't have the opportunity to get the names of your interviewers before you go to the interview, you can at least familiarize yourself generally with the way the firm is set up and works. And then once you do find out, even if it's at the time that your interview begins, who you'll be speaking with, you can make educated assumptions about how you should phrase some of the answers to your questions and present yourself. Keep in mind that lawyers who are interviewing you at a law firm know what makes their firm different. What they're really trying to do is understand you and think about how you would be a good fit in their organization. So the more you understand that going in, the better. The background that you can get from the firm depends on how big the firm is, where it's located, the nature of its practice, etc. Most firms have websites. Larger firms are more likely to have extensive materials available. They will have a large alumni network. You may have an opportunity to speak with people who've worked in similar positions as you're seeking, either recently or at some point in the past. Smaller firms, it might not be as easy to get information about the firm, but nonetheless, you should find out what you can within reason. You don't have to know everything. But that way, if you go in knowing what makes their firm different than some of their competitors or other firms that you might be interviewing with, or that other candidates for this position are likely to consider for similar jobs, then you will have an idea of what mold they're looking to fill. But if you learn something surprising during the interview, you can't just walk out and say, oh, I didn't know that about this firm. Sorry, I'm not interested anymore. You should always remain open-minded in this situation. Don't jump to conclusions. It's possible that the person you're speaking to really didn't have the full understanding of the issue, or they somehow misspoke or you misunderstood them. So even if you think there is a red flag that's gone up in the interview, try to continue the interview. Obviously, if it's something totally inappropriate and you're at the totally inappropriate question, that'd be a different matter and you could bring that to someone's attention. But assuming it's just, you misunderstood a description of their practice area or the office dynamics and that turns you off, at least continue with the interview. Maybe you can ask more questions to get that explained, or you can speak to someone else, a subsequent interviewer or someone else within the firm to clarify your impression to see if you would still be interested and then, determine how that affects their interest in you. But as long as you would still be interested in working with the firm, even if you feel that something has come up that makes it questionable whether they would be interested in you, just show how you can best fit into what they're looking for. And sometimes fitting in actually means bringing new perspectives. So it's not just that you were like everyone else that has previously filled this position, but perhaps based on your past experiences or traits about you or your personality or what have you, you might actually bring something new to the firm that is still consistent with their overall mission, but helps them be more successful. So it's not just a continuation of what they've always been or always done, but don't expect that you're going to dramatically change. If a law firm represents shareholders in suits against corporations and you want to represent boards in those types of disputes, then they're not likely to make a 180 change in their practice just to suit you. Many other examples of where there wouldn't be a good fit. But if it's just personality issues or what law firm you've worked at in the past, what size they've been, what practice areas you've worked in, or just are hoping to move into, or what you've studied in law school, some of these disconnects could still be overcome. But it is up to you as the person being interviewed to explain the fit. Do you have relevant work or educational experience? Can you demonstrate why you're looking to change your practice area if that's the case? Or the setting of work? For example, if you previously worked in a small firm, why are you now looking to work in a larger firm? If you previously worked in an in-house position, why are you looking to move back to private practice? Or if you have worked in areas other than the law for some time after, for example, finishing law school and now want to return to legal practice, again, you need to explain both why you are making that move and how it could benefit the firm that you're interviewing with. And of course, never underestimate the importance of personality and culture. People want to hire people that they think they're going to enjoy being around or working with. For most lawyers and in most law firms, you're going to spend an extensive amount of time communicating with the other attorneys within the firm. Not necessarily all of them, especially if it's a larger firm, but some of them, and likely some of the ones who are interviewing you for the position. So be yourself, but demonstrate that you are an actual person and not just the words on your resume. And then at the same time, evaluate how well you feel that you could fit in with the way the office is already set up. Because again, you can't expect coming in as a new hire that you would be able to dramatically change or alter the dynamics that are already in place. Okay, our next big strategy, and one that really separates an average interview from a really exceptional one, is what we call show and don't tell. One way of thinking of this is an artist painting a picture or a storyteller telling a story. Anyone can memorize the right buzzwords and say, oh, I've always wanted to be a corporate attorney, or I've always wanted to be a commercial litigator. I took X class and Y class, just like everybody else who does the same thing should do, for example. And I'm hardworking, I'm motivated, I put in long hours, all the things that certainly will be expected in the position. You could just recite. But can you actually demonstrate through facts and details and description that you have walked the walk and actually done the things that demonstrate that you have these characteristics and that you've actually learned what you need to learn in whatever your past educational or work experiences may be? Another way of looking at this is that you can't change who you are, but you can show who you are more effectively. It's one thing just to say the right things, but demonstrating that you actually mean it is much more impactful. So when asked, what subjects in law school did you like the best, try to go beyond just saying tax law or trust and estates. Explain an experience you had studying that subject that demonstrates your actual interest in the subject matter. It could be that you had a very impactful professor in some way, but the person who taught you a subject doesn't necessarily show a lot about your ability to apply the subject to the real world of law practice. Nonetheless, if you can explain the extensive interaction you had with that professor based on their enthusiasm for the subject, you can demonstrate how you may have gained a deeper knowledge of the subject area in law school than the average student would have, for example. By the same token, when you're describing any past work experiences, you don't necessarily need to identify the clients of the firms you were working with, especially if there could be confidentiality issues. But you want to walk through the types of projects you worked on in some detail rather than just saying, well, yes, I wrote summary judgment motions for breach of contract cases. That could range from very simple writing exercises for mundane cases to super complex research and writing assignments related to hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. So the more details you can provide to show what you did rather than just summarily state what you did is likely to distinguish you. But of course, you always have to answer truthfully. Being yourself is the best way, first of all, to ensure you don't end up with a job that isn't right for you. If you oversell yourself, again, you're going to put yourself in a position that you may not be able to live up to, and that could have a negative impact on your short and long-term career prospects. Of course, you want to let every interviewer know the strongest points about your candidacy, but be truthful when they ask about your weak points as well. If it is critical for a certain job that you be very good with numbers, say, for example, because in the tax or corporate finance space, you're going to have to review documents that are number laden and be conversant with how the numbers interrelate. And in reality, you have no interest in working with numbers and have always struggled with math and arithmetic in general, then you won't be doing yourself a service by suggesting that you're very strong with accounting, for example, just because you happen to get an A in a college level accounting class, but in reality have never worked with numbers outside of the classroom and hope that you never need to do so. At all costs, however, avoid becoming defensive. If a question is asked that you know you don't have the most positive answer to, for example, you flat out don't have experience that the question suggests that you need to have to be qualified for that position, you don't want to attack the questioner, the interviewer, or the attorney that you're speaking with by telling them that their question's not important or that what they're asking shouldn't be asked at this stage of the interview process, or even just to suggest that, well, it doesn't matter that I don't have that experience, because there's usually a way to address any question in an honest and positive light. So if you are going to say, I don't have that experience, but whatever follows the but should not be defensive, but rather illustrative of why that you may nonetheless still be qualified despite the part of the answer that came before the but. And this is a more practical tip, but one that a lot of people get caught up with as a logistical matter during interviews. But don't be afraid to think before you speak. Lawyers aren't always expected to have the exact right answer off the top of their head on an instant. If you're asked a question, especially one that's somewhat substantive or requires review of multiple facts or circumstances, whether it be related to legal matters that you've dealt with or either even your background in other ways, it's perfectly appropriate to take a moment, which in most cases really is only going to be a few seconds before you start to respond verbally. More often than not, the interviewer won't even notice the hesitation or the pause. If they do, however, it's just as likely that they're going to appreciate that you're being reflectful rather than just spontaneously throwing out whatever you can think of. Certainly, there'll be many questions that you can answer instantly because they're relatively routine or just ask for information that you plainly know the answer to. But other questions at times in certain interviews will be more complicated, and taking the time to deliberate over them is not only perfectly acceptable, but in itself can reflect the qualities of a good attorney. Throughout the interview, similarly, pacing is important. You don't want to be the only one talking. The interviewer has a job to do and let them work too. Frankly, many attorneys enjoy speaking, have a lot of experience with it, are very good at describing, whether it be in the form of questions or in their responses to questions that you may ask throughout the interview. So don't think it's bad if the interviewer is taking up some of the time off your clock. It's not all about you being interviewed as the candidate for the position, saying everything that you can think of. So you don't want to just provide long answers to every question. Some questions warrant short answers, and then if the interviewer needs more information, they can ask a follow-up. If you ramble on too much, it can just become obvious that you're not being very thoughtful about the question and just trying to put out everything that might possibly be responsive. On the other hand, you may just be taking up too much time on an area that the interviewer doesn't have as much interest in as either you do or you think that they do. So, of course, hear them out, listen to the question, understand what you're being asked, and then take a pause, think about it, and respond. If they ask you what law school you went to, obviously you can provide an answer quickly. If they ask you to explain your understanding of some legal doctrine that's relevant to the type of work you'll be doing at the firm, then you understandably should have more time to think. If they ask you a personal based question in the sense of what are your interests, then perhaps it's a middle ground. Again, though, a 2, 3, 4 second pause before you start to verbalize your response is, first of all, likely to give you a good opportunity to put your thoughts together in a cogent way, and at the same time, not likely to stand out to the interviewer as any sort of inappropriate hesitation or suggestive of anything negative about you. At the same time, be personable throughout. Speak like an actual human, not a robot. It's okay to put a little bit of humor in certain places in your responses. It's okay to add anecdote that might draw a smile. It's okay to comment on someone's offhand suggestion about, oh, they had done the same thing. If you just want to ask a quick question about that, it doesn't all have to be about you maximizing every second of the interview to say how great you are. The act of the interview, the conversational component of the interview is also going to help demonstrate your fit or lack of fit for the position. And towards the end of most interviews for law firm positions, it's fairly typical when time allows to ask the candidate whether they have any questions. When you're asked to ask questions, I strongly encourage you to ask to know and not to impress. In other words, you're not being asked what questions you can think of because the interviewer wants to figure out how good you are at coming up with questions. You're genuinely being asked to ask questions to get the information you need to determine whether this would be the right fit for you. If there's an answer to a question that the interviewer can provide that would lead you to no longer be interested in the position, then they would rather you get that information in the interview process rather than them continue the process, potentially lose out on another candidate because they've decided they prefer to ask you to work with them when you then turn them down based on something that's come up during the interviews. Plus, it's not enough for you just to waste this opportunity to demonstrate what great questions you can come up with. You really should be looking to get the information that you need. So, you do want to prepare, and you want to prepare great questions, but again, questions that are great in the sense of getting you the information you need, more so than questions that just look impressive. Don't try to predict what you're supposed to ask, for example. The interviewer probably doesn't have a checklist of questions in front of them, and when you ask a question, they're looking down to see if you've asked one of the right questions. They just genuinely are going to listen to your question and try to provide an answer. Obviously, there are questions that would be inappropriate, and you should be able to recognize those before you consider asking them. So the best way to prepare your questions is evaluate what information you actually need to know to help you decide whether this particular position is right for you. It could be a question about how work gets assigned, about the nature of the work that this office versus others within the firm performs. It could be related to current trends in the area of law that you have experience working with, and you need to understand how the firm handles these issues. There's any number of questions that might be relevant to you. But again, I really encourage you to think about which questions you actually want answers to versus just trying to recycle the same questions because you think they're going to sound impressive. And on that same token, don't ask everyone the same questions. Think about who you're speaking with. If you are a law student looking for your first law firm job and you're interviewing with the senior partner of that firm, you're likely to ask different questions of that person than you would if you were interviewing with someone who is more recently out of law school. And then you may even ask different questions of someone who went to your law school versus a different law school, because you'd have different relative levels of shared experience or likely shared experience with those different groups of interviewers. So you can think about that throughout the process as well to try to get the most relevant information you can if you're meeting with multiple attorneys. And because interviews typically do wind down with the interviewer asking the hiring attorneys questions, you can use the questions to sort of summarize and wrap up your presentation through that interview. You can use them, of course, to demonstrate your genuine interest in the position by asking good questions related to the firm and the position you are seeking. And you can also use them as a means of getting answers that you can comment on briefly, I emphasize, to show how the answer matches with your interests and qualifications. So, for example, if you ask the question of how do associates at your level get assigned work in this office or this department of this firm, and the answer reveals that the process is similar to the one in the firm that you are currently working with and considering leaving, then you can note that and show that you're familiar with working in that sort of process. If, on the other hand, it differs from the process you're used to, you can comment on how you feel that that process is better than the one you're coming from, which might also help explain why you're looking to change firms at that point in time. But again, don't belabor your comments at this point. In most cases, once you're asking questions, you're in the phase of the interview where you want to get your answers and let the interviewer do most of the talking with just a little bit of commentary from you to further, again, a conversational element. If there's still time left after you've exhausted your questions, don't feel that you have to ask a numerous amount of additional questions. The question you might ask is something along the lines of, is there anything else that you would be interested in hearing about? Was there anything else on my resume that stood out to you? Is there anything else I could answer for you at this time? And then see where the interviewer takes it from there. At the end of the day, be yourself. You're looking for a job that suits you, and nothing beat being your true self, because you both show whether you would be a good fit for the position as well as possible under the circumstances with a limited experience of maybe a 30-minute interview to evaluate that. But you also show how maybe you stand out above the crowd, the other candidates who are being interviewed. If you try to play it safe and respond like everyone else would, then you may not distinguish yourself. So by being yourself, you're likely to stand out. If you don't stand out the same way as another candidate and the firm decides that the other candidate is the direction they prefer to go, then you'll have to accept that and move on to the next opening. In every example, once you've been through an interview process, you should be grateful just to have had that opportunity. Again, being turned down is not necessarily your fault or doesn't dictate your worth as a candidate. It just means that the firm decided that someone else was going to be a better fit at that time. Perhaps they're wrong. Perhaps you would have been a better fit, but they don't have all the possible information necessary to make that decision, so they're doing the best they can. You grow from each interview. The experience, just like many other experiences, will help you as you do it again and again. If you have multiple interviews, then you are likely to hone your approach to answering certain styles of questions. And hopefully you're also, as you go through the process, getting a better idea of what types of firms and positions really would be a good match for you at this point in your career. So with that all being said, we do offer interview training in the form of mock interviews. If you want to click in the description below or on the link on the video here, you will be able to go over to my Fiverr page and sign up for our mock interview services. And I'll be happy to do a mock interview of an appropriate length with feedback, verbal or written as you prefer. And then you will be able to basically get some of that experience of interviewing with the additional benefit of having direct feedback provided, which you don't get in most cases in the actual interview setting. So again, if that's something you'd be interested in, right now Fiverr is the way to do that, and be happy to work with you going forward.